You're listening to the Fierce Fatty Podcast, episode 88. Today we're talking about fat sex. Let's do it.
Perfect.
I'm Victoria Wellesby, TEDx speaker, best-selling author, and fat activist. I have transformed my life from hating my body with desperately low self-esteem to being a courageous and confident, fierce fatty who loves every inch of this jelly. Society teaches us living in a fat body is bad, but what if we spent less time, money, and energy on the pursuit of thinness and instead focused on the things that actually matter, like if pineapple on pizza should be outlawed, or if the mullet was the greatest haircut of the 20th century. So, how do you stop negative beliefs about your fat body controlling your life? It's the Fierce Fatty Podcast. Let's begin. Let's talk about sex, baby. Let's talk about you and me. Let's talk about the persons that can be. Let's talk about sex. Let's talk about sex. Do you remember that song from the 90s? And that other song, Right Said Fred. Do you remember that one? I'm too sexy for my shirt, too sexy for my shirt, too sexy it hurts. I remember that being on... I might have been like Top of the Pops or something, and my mum being there and me like just the word sex, me being like, oh, this is so embarrassing. Yeah, so let's talk about fat sex today and things that go around fat sex. I've been rewatching Game of Thrones, the HBO most watched TV show in history, I think. Anyway, I watched season 1 when it first came out, but then I didn't watch lots of the seasons, and then I picked it up again at like season 6 or 7 or 5 or something. Anyway, and so I was just like, do you know what? I need to go back and watch it all because you know. And so I've been binging it. Let me see where I'm at. On season 6, oh my god. I've watched 6 seasons of Game of Thrones in, I don't know, maybe a couple of weeks, couple of days, couple of hours, who knows. Anyway, so Game of Thrones, lots of tits, right? Women's tits. And not enough dicks. There was a dick today. I saw a dick today. But the rest of them, they haven't been real. Anyway, and it just got me thinking about tits. And as you do, just having a little think about tits. All of the people in the show most of the people in the show in leading roles are stereotypically attractive, and there's this use of, whapping out the baps as a way to kind of make it, it's like very violent, sex and incest and all sorts of different things like that, and so. Yeah, but they don't have knobs. They don't have knobs. It's not fair. And yeah, anyway, the tits that they show are stereotypically the tits that society tells us are good tits. So they're not saggy tits. They're not tits with inverted nipples. They're not tits that one goes one way, one goes the other. They're not tits where one's bigger than the other. They're not tits where they're teeny tiny tits. They're all stereotypically quote unquote attractive tits. And I'm getting annoyed with it. And anyway, watching 6 seasons of Games of Thrones, it's not good for my mental health anyway, because there's lots of violence in it. I had a nightmare about beheading, and and it just made me think about attractiveness, and why is it that in the show, like the show has a fatphobia problem anyway, like the fat characters, there's a lot of like, oh, look at that one, he's fat, and oh, look, he's so fat, he eats food and shit like that, which is, boring. But then sometimes the good characters are fat, but it's kind of like they're fat, but at least they're kind of noble, But they're not attractive and fat and good. They're not a main character who's fat and the savior. They're kind of quietly maybe good, but they're kind of making up for their fatness. Anyway, so this whole thing got me thinking about attractiveness and my view of attractiveness and being fat, and my history of fat sex, having sex as a fat person, and what that means and what fat people's attractiveness means in society. And I've noticed a difference in my life after learning to love and accept my body and learning about fat politics, a difference in my sex life, in my romantic life, in my whole life, basically my whole life. Some things have become harder, but ultimately more rewarding, setting boundaries and ending relationships, making new relationships. That shit's hard, right? But one of the things that took a while for me to see a clear difference in is sex. And a couple of reasons. I was in long-term relationships and I don't know, just didn't have the opportunity to have shit tons of sex. Very sad. And also, I think this is a very sticky and tricky subject because our desirability is so tied up with our worth as human beings, and being seen as desirable or sexually attractive seems to be, in society's terms, a very, very, very important quality. So the two areas I want to look at are the way that we perceive our own fat bodies and the way that other people perceive our fat bodies. So other people, maybe our romantic partners, our fuck buddies, other people in society, people that you're not maybe having sex with. But and I got kind of interested in this concept of fat not being a sexual preference after watching a video a year ago by the fat sex therapist Sonali Rashatwar, and Sonali made a video called Fatphobia is not a sexual preference. And what Sonali says in this video, I'm going to link to this video and all of the other articles and stuff that I mentioned in this video in the show notes. You can find the show notes at fiercefatty.com/059 for episode 59. If you ever forget which episode we're talking about and you want the show notes, just go to /podcast and you'll find them. So Sonali says, sexual orientations and sexual fetishes are not sexual preferences. Sexual preferences are not hardwired, they are really socially conditioned. We have some control of the fluidity of those preferences. And also, don't hide behind the excuse of sexual preference. Name it for what it is, fatphobia. People are not hardwired to be never attracted to XYZ people, so fat people or black people or trans people or whatever. People are not hardwired to not be attracted to those people. Society informs us of who we should be attracted to and where certain bodies falls on this hierarchy that society has created, which is totally made up, right? I always like to think about it as through the lens of art. I've mentioned before that I studied illustration at university, and one of the things that that really stuck with me is what is art? And you know how some people are like, how can that be art? It's just a, white square on a white background. That's not art. And it's like, well, yeah, it is, because art is something that causes a reaction, even, if it's negative or positive or whatever, that's causing a reaction with you. So then it's art, right? It doesn't matter if you don't like it. And so it's all subjective. Someone else might come to this white square on a white background and say, oh my God, this is inspired. I need it. Incredible. And someone else is like, this is bullshit. And so there's no kind of art police that says this is art or this isn't art. And yes, like, you can be more skilled in the art of mark making and making realistic depictions of things. But anyway, I always like to think about it like that. So fat phobia is not a sexual preference. Watch this video from Sonali, and it's really interesting. It's really interesting. Our preferences are not made in a vacuum. Society viewing fat bodies as unattractive. I know that's not everyone, but overall, it's pretty agreed upon that smaller bodies are more attractive in society in general. And there's obviously lots of exceptions to that, and lots of people who don't agree with that for many different reasons. So something that Caleb Luna says, Caleb wrote, I'm going to link to this, wrote, treating my friends like lovers, the politics of desirability. I'm going to link to that. And what Caleb says is, our desire and desirability is not just about who we do or want to have sex with, or who or how often people want to have sex with us. It informs how we treat people in the larger world. So this is big stuff, right? Our desirability, or how much we think that other people find us attractive, informs how we are treated in the world. And if you are seen in society as more attractive, or if you're seen as ugly, then you have more or less social capital. That makes sense? Another thing that I want to share with you is a piece written by Hari Ziad, and the piece is called 3 Reasons Dating, Attraction and Desire Are Always Political. So in this article, a quote from Jamal T. Lewis. This is a quote from Jamal T. Lewis. Desire is a cognitive and an emotional phenomenon informed by something. Let me repeat that. Desire is a cognitive and emotional phenomenon informed by something. And then it continues, they explained in an interview with me, which is an assertion backed up by science. The article continues. For instance, in a study published in the Archives of Sexual Behaviour entitled, Is Sexual Racism Really Racism? The researchers found that racist attitudes were associated with racial/sexual preferences, suggesting that racism informs sexual desires. And at the end of the piece, I'd argue that oppression's most effective tool is in systematically making marginalized individuals feel unworthy and deserving of their treatment so that they will be less inclined to fight. So society, the structure and the systems in society tell us that fat bodies are bad for a number of reasons, and one of those ways that they are bad is they are not sexually attractive. And so as a fat person, we live in a society where on the whole our bodies, we're told that they're not attractive. And so how does that affect us, and how does that affect those who might date us or be with us or want to have sex with us or be friends with us even? And the answer is it in a massive way. If you're a fat person and you've been inclined to have sex and be in the dating world and stuff, I'm sure you've got examples of, you've got stories to tell, I bet ya. Now, this is an awesome Vice article. I think Marie Despina wrote it. Yeah. Just at the top of my head. So the article, again, I'm going to link it. Fatphobia exists, and it's especially bad in the bedroom. So I'm going to read a little quote from this. It can also show up in the bedroom, quoting fatphobia in life, and it can also show up in the bedroom. It can also show up in the bedroom. From the person I nearly hooked up with who asked, "Is it true that fat girls smell like cheeseburgers down there?" To a dude who told my friend to guide him in because I don't think I'll be able to find it through the flab. There's no doubt that weight bias can penetrate even the most intimate of settings. Fat people have to navigate a dating pool that often feels saturated with folks who believe that they are, quote, settling for us, unquote, who want to non-consensually fetishize our bodies, or who assume we should be grateful for any attention we receive and abuse us because they believe it's their right to do so. Of course, plenty of fat people can and do have amazing, fulfilling, glorious sex and relationships eventually. I certainly did. Still, the below stories prove that fatphobia doesn't discriminate when it comes to the places it'll show up. And then Marie shares stories that people have shared. One of the stories that really resonated with me, they're all like, holy shit. But one that resonated with me was from Rose 38. Rose 38 says, "There was a guy I slept with, may have even dated him for a while, who told me fat girls are better in bed because they have nothing to offer a man, so they would go all the way. Like they would bend over backwards and do nasty things because they are ugly and no one wants them. They used to say because our thighs touch that we would have tighter vaginas, just making me feel like my only reason to exist was to pleasure someone. I was about 19 or 20 when this happened to me. I really felt quite worthless at that point. Like no matter what I liked or who I stood for, no one would see me for who I was. Instead, I would only be seen as a sexual object. Very early on, I learnt that there were men who would sleep with me in secret but never date me, and then I knew that my price to pay was to be easy. We truly deserve more. I wish I had learnt earlier that all they wanted was just to use me, but it's okay. I learned from those experiences and I'll never go back." So that was from Rose 38 in the Vice article. That really spoke to me about, it really resonated with me because it was like that's, a lot of my personal experiences before learning that it's okay to be fat. So I always wanted to date people who were stereotypically attractive. I believe that it would raise my attraction levels to be with someone who was stereotypically attractive. And so I probably wouldn't have dated fat people. I'm trying to think if I ever did. Yeah, maybe a couple. But I would want to be, they would have to be showing to the world that they were attractive in other ways. Like, maybe they were, masculine. So maybe they were tall and maybe they had a beard and maybe they, et cetera, et cetera. So I remember one time when I was 17 and I was getting off the school bus and my abuser boyfriend, who was 30, was there waiting for me to meet me from school. And one of my school friends got off the bus and I was like, "Oh, look, there's my boyfriend." And he was like, "You're with him? How did you get with him?" And instead of being offended that he thought that I was so ugly that I could get with someone who was conventionally attractive, I was like proud, because it was like, well, yeah, obviously I can get with someone like that because I'm amazing. Obviously I didn't think that, but that's kind of like how I took it of he was a trophy to me. And even though he abused me in every way, imaginable, he was attractive. So, I was so lucky to be with him. And I accepted that he would say abusive things about my body because I believed them to be true. And so when he complained, saying, "Why do your tits look like that? Why do you have saggy tits?" I would be like, apologizing for my body. I want to go back right now and just like teleport and just go and punch him in the face. So I would have sex with people way before I wanted to prove that I had value because I could please them and prove that someone wanted me. And I wanted them to fall in love with me because I had had sex with them. And it would mean that they had overlooked my fatness. But they did it because I had so much more to give because I was having sex with them. And this is a lesson I learned very young. So in my neighborhood, there was a boy that would come and visit his grandma, and his grandma lived opposite me, Daniel Oswin, my first boyfriend. And so I would be his girlfriend, but also there was a girl that lived 2 doors behind him called Jenny Rogalski. Jenny was blonde and thin. And so he would swap between the two of us. I mean, there was no other boy. I guess because there was no other boys our age around. So he would like dump me and go out with her, and then dump her and go out with me. And I would always say to him, "Daniel, you know, I'll do more things with you than Jenny's. Jenny won't like kiss you," because we were like kissing each other. So this is when I was like, I don't know, 10. Yeah, about 9 or 10, we would like kiss. And so to get him more and more interested, I would say, "Oh, let's try this new kiss that the kids on the street were talking about." And it was like, you know, do the washing machine kiss where you like roll your tongue around each other's mouths, and the rainbow kiss. Oh my God, this is so disgusting. Skip ahead 30 seconds if you don't want to hear something disgusting. But the rainbow kiss was when you would stand close to each other, and then you would spit into each other's mouths, and the rainbow bit would be like the spit going up into the air and then into their mouth, and then the other would reciprocate. That would be the rainbow kiss. I'm telling you, I bet you some adult was like, some kid was like, "What's kissing mean?" And then someone said, "It means spitting into each other's mouths." And then some kid heard that and was like, "This is what kissing is." And then kids did it, That wasn't, I remember doing that and being like, "Oh, that's so disgusting." But, if I do it, then Daniel won't dump me. He dumped me in the end. Who knows who he ended up with? Not me, obviously, and not Jenny Rogalski. But, yeah. So with all partners, I believed that it was my job to sexually satisfy them and to avoid having to inconvenience them with my wants, needs, and desires, to the point of about 95% of the orgasms I had were fake. If a guy tried to pleasure me, one, I wouldn't be comfortable because I felt like I didn't deserve the pleasure because, he was doing me a favor by having sex with me. Two, I believed that he was probably feeling disgusted that he was having to pleasure me. And three, I wanted them to believe that I was so easygoing and that I was so like a porn star that I would fake an orgasm in like 2.5 seconds. And so if a guy was interested in making sure that I had fun, I wouldn't let him, because I'd be like, he'd look at me and I'd be like, "Oh my God, I just had an orgasm." And he'd be like, "Okay, okay, well, that was easy." And so it's kind of just contributed to this feedback loop of them thinking that they could make me come just by flopping their dick out. And I'd be like, "Oh my God, I just had an orgasm." And so then how hard would that be then for me to be like, "Oh, actually, no, you have to do stuff." So I would constantly want to make up for the fact that they had a defective partner by doing stuff I didn't necessarily want to do, or making myself hypersexual for them. So, buying lingerie and constantly shaving my legs and shaving my arsehole and going to sex classes to learn how to give great blowjobs and hand jobs and all sorts of things, and being super feminine and trying to portray myself as weak and as little as possible to try and be this kind of porn star type person to make up for the fact that they had to have sex with a fat person. Now, most of my boyfriends weren't like, oh my God, you're fat. Ooh, it's gross. I guess I'll have to have sex with you. It was only really that first one who behaved like that, and probably like some random guys in between who might have said comments and stuff like that kind of reinforced it. And society telling me constantly that being fat was really bad, and these poor guys, oh my God, they're having to date these fat people. Oh, terrible, terrible life. To the point that I would accept. So I was doing all this stuff, lingerie, shaved arsehole, fucking bleached ear holes, like, you know, porn star hair, all that type of stuff. And in return, I would accept like a smelly dick, shit stained underwear, and a couple of pumps, and be thankful for it. And be like, oh, you know, great sex life. Yeah, like, he might have been covered in his own shit, but who cares? This is a thing. Have you heard about this? It's a thing. Oh, it's called chef's ass. If you don't want to hear something disgusting, do you know what? If you don't want to hear something disgusting, you should probably just not listen to any episodes. Or this one in particular. Chef's ass, right? So there's this thing going around not even going around, it's been around the cis-het men, that after they shit, some of them believe that it would be gay to wipe their own ass. And it would be gay to wash their own ass in the shower. This is a thing. Google it. Chef's ass. There's lots of message boards about it, and men being like, yeah, well, why would I touch my asshole? Because I'm not gay. And, you know, I'm not touching my asshole with soap. I'll just let water run over it, you know, and hope the shit might fall off. And there was this like one woman on there who was like, my boyfriend refuses to wipe his ass, and every time he comes over, he leaves shit stains in my bed. If we have sex, it absolutely reeks of shit. And I've spoken to him about it, and he refuses, or he says he forgets to wipe his ass. And what can I do? Like, he's a nice guy. I don't want to break up with him, but, you know, there's shit everywhere. And yeah, like, I would accept that. I would accept that shit, literally, because I'd be like, well, they're dealing with something as equivalently disgusting as shit, my body, which is not true, by the way. The chef's ass is true, but the rest of it isn't. So when I learn about fat positivity and fat activism and all that type of stuff, I started to, in relationships, in sexual encounters, ask for more. And that was either confusing for them or annoying for them. The men I was picking anyway. So not all men are like this, obviously. But the types of men I might have been hooking up with, if they had said fatphobic things before we went to bed, I wouldn't have been like, oh, sounds like he's a bit of fatphobe, I don't think I should get with him. I'd be like, well, you know, whatever. He's right. So now I say tend to because sometimes it still happens. I tend to not get into a situation where I would have sex with a fatphobe, or would have sex with someone who thinks that my body is less because it is fat. Because generally speaking, unless you like, you know, meet someone and you don't really talk and then you just have sex, generally speaking, you can kind of get an idea about someone before you have sex. Not always. You know, sometimes people can be like the last guy I had sex with like a year ago. So depressing. I need some more dick. This quarantine has really got me bad, and I live in the middle of nowhere. Anyway, so I had sex with this guy, and before I'm like, he's a pretty normal, reasonable guy, and so this motherfucker. So I went around his house, right? I spent the evening. During the evening, I made him come 3 times. He was like, "Oh my God, this is amazing." My turn for an orgasm. 2 minutes in, he says, "Hurry up." This motherfucker had his balls drained. And 2 minutes of the focus being on me, he's like, "Oh, God, haven't you come yet? It's been like 12 seconds. And I was just like, no, mate, no. No, thank you. Didn't see him again because I was like, what the fuck? Before, I would have just been like, oh yeah, just had an orgasm, faked it because he would have been putting pressure on me to perform or whatever. So now understanding that there's kind of like what we're talking about in this podcast, 2 things going on here. The 2 things being the way that we perceive our fat bodies and the way that society perceives our fat bodies. And the way that I view it now is that my fat body is not a problem. However, a lot of the people that I will encounter when pursuing relationships think that my body is a problem. And then that's a problem for me because I am not going to be with someone who thinks that my body is a problem, who thinks, oh, I'll date her because, like Rose had said, oh, maybe she's like great in bed because she's fat, so she has to make up for being fat, or whatever they believe. Or maybe I'll just have sex with her, but I won't be seen in public with her. Maybe I'll just, I'll tell her that I want to pursue a relationship, but I don't. I'll just have sex and then see you later. Whatever it is. That's not okay with me. Like, that's not okay. That is not okay for people to treat me like that. And people like that are out there. Absolutely. And unfortunately, most of the people who are in the dating world or the sex world or whatever it is, are biased. Have fatphobic beliefs. Like deeply fatphobic beliefs that they don't want to examine. And say, oh, it's just a preference. It's just a preference. And their preference is to non-consensually fetishize thin bodies. And like Sonali says, just to not call it out and say, yeah, I'm a fatphobe. Yeah, I'm just a fatphobe, and genuinely think that they were born and their brain had this preference implanted in there that said, I will never be attracted to a fat body. No fat person on earth, of all the billions of people out there, not a single one could I ever possibly be attracted to. Like, that's ridiculous. That's redonk. And this is not about forcing people to come and have sex with me. Like, it's not about that. It's about people examining their biases. Because we all have biases, right? So we've got that one side, society. But then also, are we going to internalize this myth that society has created? This rating system, this hierarchy of bodies that society has created that most people will never benefit from, right? So, all these different shows or, in society you say, oh, she's a 10, or how attractive are you in a scale of 1 to 10? Most people are not going to be rated a 10, right? And so for everyone who's a 9 and below, that system is not good for them. So why are we buying into this system? It's literally just made up. It's made up. Right? We just said, okay, in our society, we think this type of body this amount of muscles on a man, this height on a man, this hair length on a woman, this breast size on a woman. This is optimal. But why? Why? It's like art, remember? It's like art. It's subjective. And so are we going to say, yep, that system that society has devised, which benefits people who are already in power, I'm going to buy into that system. And I agree with it 100%. And because of that, I'm going to accept less in my life. Nah, don't like it. Nah, not interested. No, thank you. And that quote, that one quote, I want to read it again from Hari Ziyad. I'd argue that oppression's most effective tool is in systematically making marginalized individuals feel unworthy and deserving of their treatment, so they will be less inclined to fight it. If we are beaten down because we think that our fat belly and our saggy tits and whatever else, our fat bodies are bad and disgusting, when someone says your body is bad and disgusting, we will probably say yeah, or say, well, that's not very nice, but they're kind of true, versus telling them to fuck off, which is what we should be doing, And it's not our faults, right? It's not anyone's fault that we internalize this stuff and we believe it. Like, it's not our job to change the world for everyone, and because we are the ones who are suffering from this too, right? It's totally normal to have internalized these things because it's so pervasive. It's everywhere. Like I'm saying on Game of Thrones, I'm like, Jesus, why can't we just get this princess who is fat and people are like, oh, she's so beautiful and it would be so amazing, but they just don't do that. And that's just one of a billion shows and messages that is out there in society that says these bodies are sexually attractive and these bodies are not sexually attractive. So where are you at with this? How's it going for you? Are you having sex with people who are fat phobes? Are you with someone who's a fat phobe? Oh, that would suck. Most people probably are, because most people are fat, really fat phobic. Are you compensating in your relationships for your fat body? Are you able to say the way that society views fat bodies is fucked up and I'm not buying into it? Some questions for you. Have a little think in your brain. In your amazing brain. And if you want the links to all of the different articles that I spoke about in this episode, go to fiercefatty.com/059 for the show notes. Or you could probably just scroll down on your screen if you're listening to this on somewhere there'll be links. Okay, so thank you for hanging out with me today and talking about sex, baby, and I appreciate it. I appreciate you being here, and I hope you're getting lots of sex and juicy orgasms if you want them, and no sex if you don't want it. And you're just feeling good. You're feeling good. All right, I'll see you in the next episode. See you later, crocodile. Stay fierce, fatty.